My sister replaced my son's injections with placebos before his violin recital to humble him, causing his collapse. Well, my mother called it nerves. But when they discovered my move against their trust fund, the moment I saw Luca collapse on that grand stage at the Sydney Conservatorium, his violin clattering to the floor in a discordant crash, I knew my life was about to unravel. It was 7:42 p.m. on a crisp March evening, the auditorium packed with scouts and parents, the air thick with anticipation. His small frame slumped sideways, his hazel eyes fluttering shut as a tremor seized his hands that had just been weaving magic with Vivaldi's Winter moments before. The audience gasped, phones flashing like wildfire, and I bolted from my seat, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. "Luca!" I screamed, shoving past startled onlookers, my heels skidding on the polished floor. By the time I reached him, he was unconscious, his breathing shallow, and the paramedics were already rushing in. That night, as they wheeled him away, sirens wailing into the Perth night, I realized this wasn't just a medical emergency. It was a betrayal that would tear my family apart. And the worst part? I suspected my own sister Sophie was behind it. I'm Clara Evans, 34, a freelance graphic designer scraping by in Perth, Australia, where the ocean breeze carries both promise and peril. If you're reading this from Sydney, London, or maybe a quiet corner of California, stick with me. This is my story, a raw, messy tale of love, survival, and the fight to protect my son when the people I'd trusted turned against us. I never thought I'd be dodging danger or uncovering dark secrets in my own backyard, but life has a way of throwing curveballs, and mine came with a violin string and a syringe. So, grab a cuppa or a coffee and let's dive in. This is where it all began, and trust me, it gets wilder. My childhood in Perth was a mix of sun-soaked beaches and shadowed rivalries. Sophie Hart, my sister, 4 years my senior, was the golden child, top of her class, captain of the netball team, her trophies lining our living room like a shrine. Our mother, Margaret, couldn't stop singing her praises, while our father, Thomas, an engineer buried in blueprints, barely noticed the tension. "Why can't you match Sophie?" Margaret would say, her voice cutting through the hum of our coastal home, her eyes narrowing at my doodles instead of Sophie's report cards. It was a refrain that shaped me, pushing me toward a quiet rebellion. Sophie soared, graduating valedictorian, winning a scholarship to Oxford, and eventually landing a high-profile gig as a media executive in Sydney. Me, I took the scenic route, enrolling in art school after high school, where I met Jake Miller, a lanky surfer with a grin that melted my defenses. We married when I was 21, a small ceremony on Cottesloe Beach with sand between our toes and dreams in our eyes. Sophie didn't hide her disdain. "You're wasting your talent, Clara," she said at the reception, her tone laced with pity, Margaret nodding beside her. "You could have been more." When I got pregnant with Luca a year later, Sophie's disapproval sharpened. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked, her voice dripping with mock concern, as if my joy was a miscalculation. I glowed with excitement, sketching nursery designs in my sketchbook, but her words planted seeds of doubt I couldn't shake. Jake was sweet at first, helping me paint the nursery a soft blue, but fatherhood hit him hard. The bills piled up, rent in Fremantle, medical costs when Luca was born with colic, and the cracks showed. By the time Luca was 6, Jake confessed he'd met someone else, a barista from Margaret River. The divorce was a blur of legal papers and tearful nights, leaving me with custody, a trickle of child support, and visits that dwindled to once a year. Meanwhile, Sophie's life was a glossy magazine spread. She married Nathan, a renowned architect, and they had Ella and Owen, kids who seemed engineered for success, excelling in robotics and debate. Their Sydney Harbour View home, with its glass walls and infinity pool, was a world away from my cramped apartment. Margaret fawned over them, dropping everything to babysit Ella and Owen, but when I needed help with Luca's doctor appointments, it was always, "Oh, I'm tied up, dear." I learned to manage alone, juggling design clients and Luca's needs, my sketch pad my lifeline. Luca's talent emerged like a hidden melody. At 7, during a community center workshop, he picked up a borrowed violin and drew notes from it that silenced the room. The instructor, a grizzled old musician named Mrs. Eleanor, pulled me aside. "Clara, your boy's got a gift. Raw, unpolished, but extraordinary." I couldn't afford a violin, so I scrounged $50, 0 cents, for a second-hand one from a garage sale in Scarborough, its strings frayed but playable. Luca was obsessed, teaching himself via YouTube tutorials, his small fingers coaxing Twinkle, Twinkle into something hauntingly beautiful. With Mrs. Eleanor's free lessons, his skill soared, and by 9, he was winning local competitions, his confidence blooming like wildflowers after rain. Then came the diagnosis. At 9, Luca started stumbling, his hands trembling during practice. After months of tests at Royal Perth Hospital, Dr. Patel delivered the news. A rare neurological disorder, manageable with daily specialized injections, but prone to severe flare-ups without them. The injections were a fortune. $300, 0 cents a vial, insurance covering half, and I took on extra gigs, designing logos until my eyes blurred to keep him stable. I became his nurse, his cheerleader, driving him to lessons and appointments, my sketch pad forgotten in the chaos. His talent grew, earning him a feature in the West Australian, but the praise came with a cost. Margaret offered faint compliments. "He's good for his age," while Sophie's unease was palpable. At family dinners in Margaret's Subiaco home, Sophie would tense when Luca's name came up, steering conversations to Ella's robotics award or Owen's debate trophy. When Luca played at a cousin's wedding, Sophie suggested it might tire him, offering Ella to perform instead. The tension peaked last year. Sophie's comments grew barbed. "Luca's too full of himself. Talent without discipline is wasted," and she'd quiz him on schoolwork, knowing his condition and practice left little room for academics. I defended him fiercely, driving 3 hours weekly to lessons with Miss Victoria, a Sydney violinist who took him on at a discount, seeing his potential. 3 weeks ago, the invitation arrived. A Sydney Conservatorium Young Performers Showcase, a prestige event for young musicians with scholarship potential. Ms. Victoria had submitted a recording of Luca's Winter without telling us. When I showed him the embossed letter, his eyes widened, a mix of terror and thrill. "Mum, this is huge," he whispered, his voice trembling. Ms. Victoria was ecstatic. This could launch his career. Scouts from the Australian Youth Orchestra will be there. She doubled his lessons, refusing extra pay when I protested our finances. For 3 months, Luca practiced relentlessly, waking at dawn, his bow flying over strings until midnight, the notes filling our apartment like a lifeline. The night before, I prepared everything. His injection kit was packed, morning and evening doses in a locked case, his black suit pressed, his music folder organized. I checked on him at 10 p.m., finding him at the violin, eyes closed, fingers tracing invisible strings. "Mental practice," he explained, grinning. "Victoria says it's key." I hugged him, my voice thick. "You'll be brilliant, love. I'm so proud." I had no idea that by tomorrow our world would shatter. The recital day dawned bright, the Perth sky a mocking blue. Luca woke early, too nervous to eat much, but he took his morning injection with juice, his hands steady. "Nervous but good," he said, forcing a smile. We drove to Sydney. 5 hours, the highway stretching like a tightrope. Arriving at the conservatorium 2 hours early, the building loomed, all glass and steel, its elegance intimidating. Luca clutched his violin case, his eyes wide as young musicians warmed up, their parents hovering. Miss Victoria met us, elegant in a charcoal dress. "There's my star," she said, hugging him. "Ready to shine?" He nodded, though his smile faltered. Backstage, he practiced in a small room, the winter's icy notes echoing. Then Sophie, Nathan, Ella, Owen, and Margaret appeared, uninvited. My stomach dropped. I'd kept the venue vague to avoid this. "Surprise," Sophie called, her voice too bright. "Wouldn't miss Luca's big day." Margaret complained about traffic, her tone dismissive. Luca's face paled. "You look off, dear," Margaret said. "Too much violin, perhaps?" "He's fine," I snapped, masking my irritation. Sophie moved closer, eyeing his suit. "Plain, isn't it? I brought a tie to spruce it up." Luca shook his head. "Miss Victoria says no accessories." Sophie's lips thinned, but she tucked the tie away. Miss Victoria pulled me aside to whisper about a Sydney Symphony Scout attending, adding pressure I didn't share with Luca. When I returned, Sophie was near his injection kit, pretending to adjust his music stand. "Where's his meds?" I asked, suddenly alert. "In his case," Luca said, pointing to his bag. "I checked," Sophie said quickly. "All set, like you do it." I frowned. "You opened his kit?" He asked for a tissue, she replied, too casual. Something felt wrong, but with the recital looming, I let it slide. A decision that would haunt me. The showcase began, the auditorium buzzing. Luca stayed backstage, and the first performers, a flutist, a cellist, a harpist, dazzled. During intermission, I found him alone, pale, massaging his temples. "Luca, what's wrong?" I asked, panic rising. "Head spinning, hearts racing," he mumbled. "Nerves, maybe." These were withdrawal signs. His disorder's warning. "Did you take your injection?" This morning, like always, I hesitated, torn between pulling him out and letting him shine. "Tell me if it worsens," I said. He nodded, returning to his violin. Back in my seat, Sophie leaned over. "Cold feet?" "He's unwell," I admitted. "Not stage fright, more like a flare-up." Margaret waved it off. "All performers get jittery." "This isn't that," I insisted. Sophie nodded smugly. "Kids skip meds sometimes." The lights dimmed, and Luca's name was called. He walked on, unsteady, his bow trembling as he began. The opening was flawless, a shiver of winter air in the notes. Then, 2 minutes in, he missed a string, a rare error. He recovered, but his tempo faltered, his blinks rapid. Midway through, during a fiendishly difficult passage, he stopped, hands shaking, then slumped, his head hitting the keys with a jarring clang before sliding off the bench. The crowd gasped, and I ran, Ms. Victoria beside me. "Luca!" I cried, cradling him as he convulsed slightly. "Call 911!" Paramedics swarmed, and Sophie and Margaret arrived. "What happened?" Margaret demanded. "Medical emergency," I snapped. "Not nerves." Sophie's calm was eerie, probably fainted from pressure. His lips were blue, breathing labored, far beyond fainting. "Does he have conditions? Meds?" a paramedic asked. "Neurological disorder, daily injections," I said, handing over his case. The paramedic frowned. "These aren't prescription. Look like saline placebos." My blood ran cold. At Royal Perth Hospital, Dr. Gwynn confirmed it. Luca's system showed no trace of his medication, replaced with harmless but ineffective saline. "He's stable now," she said, "but without timely intervention he could have had a stroke or worse." I stared at the injection kit, the vials subtly off-smoother, less textured. Sophie had handled it. As Luca slept, monitors beeping, I confronted her in the waiting room. "You tampered with his injections," I accused, my voice low. She paled. "Clara, Tell me," she whispered, I swapped them with saline, just for the recital, to humble him. I'd switch them back. He could have died, I hissed. Saline's not dangerous. She scoffed, but her eyes betrayed fear. Margaret intervened. She meant well, a lesson gone wrong. Well, I shouted, this was deliberate. A nurse escorted them out, and Jake arrived, horrified. She did what? He gasped. Child Services was notified, and a social worker, Ms. Carter, outlined charges: child endangerment, assault. I sat by Luca, rage and grief warring inside me. My sister, my family, had risked his life out of jealousy. The road ahead was dark. But I'd fight to protect him, no matter the cost. The hospital room was suffocating, the antiseptic tang mixing with the beeping of Luca's monitors as I sat by his bedside, his small hand limp in mine. It was 2:17 a.m. on March 15, 2025, and the weight of Sophie's betrayal crushed me like a tidal wave. The paramedics had confirmed it. His injection, the lifeline for his rare neurological disorder, had been swapped with a placebo, sending him into a seizure on that Sydney conservatorium stage. But as I stared at the cracked window where a brick had shattered the silence an hour ago, a chilling note taped to it, "Back off, or he's next," I realized this was no isolated act. My sister's jealousy had spiraled into something darker, and the midnight call with its guttural breathing still echoed in my ears. I clutched the audio recorder I'd found hidden in Luca's violin case. Sophie's voice plotting with an unknown accomplice, and knew I was up against more than family vendettas. This was war, and my son was the target. If you're with me from Perth, New York or London, hold tight. This is where the stakes skyrocket and the truth gets murkier. I'm Clara Evans, 34, a freelance graphic designer from Perth, Australia, still reeling from the night my world imploded. If Chapter 1 left you gripping your seat as Luca collapsed, you ain't seen nothing yet. This is my fight to shield my 13-year-old violin prodigy son from a conspiracy that's threatening to silence his talent forever. The ocean winds of home feel distant now, replaced by the shadows creeping into our lives. So, pour yourself a strong coffee and let's plunge into the chaos. The danger's real, the secrets are deep, and the redemption? It's coming, but not without a battle. The first few days after Luca's collapse were a blur of hospital corridors and whispered threats. Dr. Nguyen had stabilized him, the IV drip pumping the right medication back into his system, but the damage was done. His hands, once so steady on the violin, trembled uncontrollably, and his eyes, usually bright with music, were hollow. "Mum, I can't play," he whispered on the second night, tears streaking his pale face. "It's gone." My heart shattered, but I forced a smile. "It's not gone, love. We'll get it back." I didn't believe it myself, not with the vandalism to my car outside, tires slashed, the note fluttering under the wiper like a death sentence. "Back off, Spark Vibe," it read, a bizarre twist since my design business had nothing to do with Luca's music. Or did it? The thought gnawed at me as I called the police, their sirens cutting through the dawn. Sophie's admission haunted me. In that sterile waiting room she'd confessed, her voice a low hiss. I swapped his injections with saline. Just for the recital, to humble him, I was going to switch them back. Her casual cruelty fueled my rage. "He could have died," I'd shouted, and Margaret's defense, she meant well, a lesson misjudged, only stoked the fire. I ordered them out, the nurse's firm hand guiding them away as Jake arrived, his face ash. "She did what?" he gasped, pulling me into a hug. Child Services stepped in, and Miss Carter, a no-nonsense social worker, outlined the charges: child endangerment, assault. I nodded, numb, as Luca's fragile breaths filled the silence, but the danger didn't stop. That midnight, as I dozed by his bed, the brick crashed through, the note's threat searing into my mind. I clutched Luca tighter, my phone trembling as I dialed emergency services again. The operator's calm voice did little to ease the panic. "We'll send a patrol," she said, but I felt exposed, vulnerable. The next morning a bouquet arrived, black roses, no card, adding to the unease. I threw them out, my hands shaking, and decided to move us to a friend's secure flat in Fremantle. Packing Luca's things, I found the audio recorder tucked into his violin case, its red light blinking faintly. Pressing play, Sophie's voice crackled. "He needs to fail, publicly." "My contact will handle the rest." A man's voice, muffled, replied, "The Academy won't tolerate competition, will escalate if she pushes." My blood ran cold. Who was this Academy, and why target Luca? The media storm hit hard. The Sydney Morning Herald ran a headline, "Media exec accused of endangering nephew's life." Sophie's face was plastered across newsstands, her executive role at Horizon Media suspended pending investigation. Restraining orders were filed. But the family split widened. Uncle Peter called pleading, "Clara, this is family, let it go." Others, like Aunt Lisa, rallied behind me, horrified. Nathan, Sophie's now ex-husband, showed up with a USB drive. "I found this after I left," he said, his voice breaking. "She's been obsessed with Luca's success for months, ranting about how you're building a monster." The drive held emails, Sophie coordinating with someone codenamed Maestro, plotting Luca's downfall. I handed it to the police, my resolve hardening. But the threats escalated. 2 weeks later, my studio in Perth was hit. Designs worth thousands were stolen, and a fire erupted in the back room, smoke choking the air as I escaped through a window, coughing and singed. The arson squad found accelerant, a note in the ashes read, "Stop digging." I collapsed on the curb, tears mixing with soot, realizing this was bigger than Sophie. That night, Luca whispered from his new bed, "Mum, someone was watching me at school." My stomach dropped. The next day I spotted a figure in a hooded jacket near the gates, disappearing when I approached. The police increased patrols, but the fear lingered. The family intervention was a disaster. Margaret hosted it at her Subiaco mansion, a gaudy affair with crystal chandeliers and judgmental stares. Relatives pressured me to forgive. "Sophie's career is ruined," Cousin Mark said. "This is enough punishment." I slammed my fist on the table. "She nearly killed Luca." "Forgiveness doesn't erase that." Margaret's ultimatum came cold. "Drop the charges, or you're out of this family." I stood, voice shaking. "If protecting my son means losing you, so be it." Walking out, I felt a strange liberation, but also isolation. The audio recording fueled my suspicions. Maestro hinted at a rival music academy, perhaps the Sydney Conservatorium itself, jealous of Luca's talent. A cryptic letter arrived, postmarked Melbourne. "You're uncovering too much. Stop, or Luca pays." The handwriting was jagged, unfamiliar. I hired a private investigator, Mr. Hayes, who traced it to a dead-end P.O. box. Then a whistleblower from Horizon Media called, anonymous and frantic. Sophie's firm silenced families before. Buyouts, threats, worse. Check the archives. The revelation sent chills down my spine. Was Luca's collapse part of a pattern? I pressed charges and Sophie was arrested, her bail denied due to the premeditation evidence. The courtroom was a circus, cameras flashing as she stood, pale and defiant, but the danger peaked when Luca was stalked again. This time, the figure threw a Molotov cocktail near our flat, missing by inches. Flames licked the fence as I pulled Luca inside, my screams lost in the sirens. The police found a matchbook from the conservatorium's bar, deepening the mystery. Who was Maestro? Why target us? Luca's therapy with Dr. Helen began slowly. He'd flinch at sudden noises, his violin gathering dust. "I'm a failure," he'd say, and I'd hold him, whispering, "You're not." Nathan's testimony and Dr. Patel's report detailing stroke risks from the placebo bolstered the case. Then, digging through Sophie's old laptop seized by police, I found a deleted email. Margaret had wired $10,000, 0 cents, to an account linked to Maestro dated before the recital. My mother's betrayal stung deeper than Sophie's. Sophie's plea deal came: probation, counseling, a lifetime media ban. But the twists kept coming. The whistleblower revealed Horizon's history of sabotaging competitors' kids, including a vanished prodigy from Brisbane. An anonymous tip linked the stalkers to the Australian Youth Orchestra, rivals to the conservatorium. I confronted Margaret, who broke down. "I funded it to protect Sophie's image," she sobbed. "I didn't know it'd go this far." I walked away, her tears meaningless. Luca's return to music was private, a cafe night in Fremantle, his self-composed silent tide a haunting blend of grief and hope. The small crowd applauded and his smile returned, tentative but real. Margaret sought amends, and Luca, after therapy, said maybe someday if she proves it. I founded a support group for parents of disabled kids, turning pain into purpose. 6 months later, Luca played at a community festival, his confidence reborn, not for fame but for himself. One evening, a letter from Sophie arrived, remorseful, detailing her therapy and regret. I kept it, unsure if Luca would read it. Margaret's calls persisted, and after a festival performance, Luca nodded at her. "We'll see," he said. Our new flat in Scarborough felt like home, Luca's health stable, his music a quiet strength. Reflecting on our journey, I realized true family is forged in love, not blood. Luca's resilience inspired me, and together we'd risen from the ashes. Have you faced a betrayal that tested your limits? Share below. Perth, LA, Manchester. If this moved you, stay with me. The harmony's just beginning.